Okay, so in this video we're going to talk a little bit about child forms and particularly child forms on the checkout page. So the reason that this concept of child forms got invented was because on the checkout page we have this really large form. We're collecting a lot of information when someone goes to make a booking. And we still wanted to be able to compartmentalize each one of these what we'll now call as a child form into being their own components. So we wanted to have a your info component, a room and guest component, a payment component, and so on and so forth. So the problem was that each one of these components was going to have their own individual form, but when we actually went to go to submit to make a booking, we weren't submitting 5 individual forms. We weren't submitting a room and guest form, a your info form, a payment form. We're just submitting one large booking form. So what we decided to do was have these 5 child forms that basically once we said, okay, each one of the 5 child forms is valid, go ahead and submit the parent form. So that's where the concept came from, and I just want to show you a little bit in Redux, kind of like a preview of where we're going, that concept. So what happens is when the user lands on the checkout page and the component mounts, we register each one of these child forms with Redux, which basically is making a count. So it goes out to Redux and it says, hey, we got 1 child form here, we have 2 child forms, 3, 4, in total we maybe have 5 child forms. So that way when the user goes to submit, Redux knows that it needs to validate 5 forms before it can consider the sum of the parts, aka the entire parent form, to be valid. So I just wanted to show you what that looks like in Redux. So this is our last event here, this window resize action. So I go to, so actually before I do that, let me just show you stuff that was going on before as a little preview before we get into the details. So this is all the actions that were happening when the user landed on this page. And you can see that we're going out and we're registering these forms with Redux. So we're just telling them this is the name of the form, and we're saying that the status of this child form is invalid, and we're also increasing the count. So we're just doing that for each one of these forms so that by the time we get here, then Redux knows, okay, there are 9 of these child forms that we need to validate before we can say that the actual parent form is 100% valid. So when I click this confirm, stuff was happening pretty quickly there. But what happens is we alert, basically we're saying, hey, we're going out, we're validating all the child forms, and then each one of these actions is doing that. So we have, this is updating one form here. It's saying, okay, I've now verified 2 forms. This was the form information that was submitted, and the status of this form is valid. It goes out and it does it for all the child forms. Finally it hits that 9th form, and it can say, okay, all of the forms, all the child forms we have checked as valid, so that must mean that the entire parent form is valid. So we're done validating the forms here. I'm going to reset the number of child forms we verified back to 0, and we're saying that the entire checkout form is valid, so we can go ahead and submit the form. There are lots of different ways that maybe various solutions could have been implemented for this particular problem, the idea of having subset forms as a part of a larger form. One of the reasons that we decided to do this route was in particular because we wanted to take advantage of the infrastructure that we had set up in our form.js component. So that will be in another video, but in the form.js component we have a lot of stuff already set up automatically so that we don't have to think about stuff like validating each individual input, scrolling to an input when it's invalid, handling the country drop downs when we want to have like a country input, a whole bunch of stuff that kind of comes out of the box when we use that form.js component. So by using these child forms, we were still able to take advantage of all that infrastructure, and being able to submit a one giant checkout form.